Supreme Chancellor Veltar stared at the small screen in his private chamber. The message was only one word long, but it burned in his mind like fire. No. That was all the human ambassador had said. Just one simple word that had never been spoken to the Galactic Council before. Veltar's blue skin turned a darker shade as anger filled him. In 10,000 years, no species had ever refused the Council's tribute demand. Every race in the galaxy knew the rules. When the Council asked for payment, you paid. When they demanded ships, soldiers, or resources, you gave them. It was the natural order of things. The Chancellor walked to his window and looked out at the massive fleet surrounding the Council's home station. Thousands of ships from hundreds of worlds floated in perfect formation. Each ship represented a species that had learned to obey. The Zephyrians with their crystal hulls, the metal ships of the Corvan Empire, the living vessels of the Bio Collective. All of them had submitted when their time came. But these humans were different. They had looked at the greatest power in the galaxy and simply said, no. A soft chime announced a visitor. War Marshal Kethmore entered the chamber, his 6 arms moving in the traditional salute. The insect-like warrior's mandibles clicked nervously as he spoke. Chancellor, the emergency session is ready. The full council waits for your orders. Veltar nodded slowly. Tell me, War Marshal, in all your battles, have you ever faced an enemy that refused to surrender? Many times, sir. But they all fell eventually. Fear always wins in the end, and yet these humans show no fear. Why? Kethmore's compound eyes glittered. Perhaps they are simply too stupid to understand their situation. Their technology is primitive. Their fleet is small. They have no allies. Logic says they should beg for mercy. The Chancellor touched the screen again, reading the human's message once more. Or perhaps they know something we do not. The council chamber was chaos when Veltar arrived. Representatives from dozens of species filled the massive hall, all talking at once. The aquatic depth dwellers floated in their water tanks, bubbles rising rapidly from their breathing slots. The crystalline resonance made harsh musical sounds that hurt the ears. The Hive Collective's drones clicked and buzzed in perfect unison. Order! Veltar's voice boomed through the chamber. The noise stopped immediately. We are here to discuss the human situation. As you all know, they have refused our tribute demand. A Zephyrian noble stood up, his crystal body glowing with emotion. This is impossible. No species refuses the council. Yet it has happened, Veltar replied calmly. The question is what we do now. The Hive Collective's speaker drone stepped forward. The answer is obvious. We crush them. We show the galaxy what happens to those who defy us. Agreed, clicked Kethmore. I request permission to take the Third Fleet to human space. One show of force should be enough. But an old voice spoke from the shadows. Ambassador Rex of the Corvan Empire moved slowly to the center of the chamber. His metal body was ancient, covered in scars from 1,000 battles. Be careful, young ones. I have studied these humans since they appeared in our galaxy. They are not like other species. They do not follow the patterns we expect. What do you mean? Asked Veltar. They are persistence hunters. On their world, they hunted animals much larger and stronger than themselves. They did this not with better claws or sharper teeth, but by never giving up. They would chase their prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. The chamber fell silent. Finally, the Hive Collective speaker asked, "What does this mean for us?" It means they do not think like we do. When we see overwhelming force, we calculate our chances and surrender if we must. When humans see overwhelming force, they look for a way to win anyway. Veltar considered this. You think they have a plan? I think they have something more dangerous than a plan. They have hope. While the council debated, news of the human refusal spread across the galaxy like wildfire. On distant worlds, in slave camps and mining colonies, oppressed beings whispered the forbidden word to each other. No. Such a simple sound, but it carried power they had forgotten existed. On the mining world Karis 7, a Talon worker named Zithkar crouched in the dark tunnels deep underground. His forearms ached from endless digging, and his shell bore the scars of many beatings. Around him, other Talon workers rested during their brief sleep period. Did you hear? Whispered his friend Grak. The humans said no to the council. Zithkar's eyes widened. That cannot be true. No one says no to the council. The news feeds confirmed it. The humans refused to pay tribute. They just said no. For a moment, none of the workers spoke. The word hung in the air like something magical. No. When was the last time any of them had said that word? When was the last time they had been allowed to refuse anything? What will happen to them? Asked a young worker. The council will destroy them, Grak said sadly. But for one moment someone said no. Similar conversations happened on 1,000 worlds. In the farming colonies of Verdania, plant workers looked up at the stars and wondered what it would feel like to choose their own path. In the factory cities of Nexus Prime, machine-bonded slaves dreamed of freedom they had never known. The council's response came exactly 72 hours after the human refusal. The announcement played on every communication channel in the galaxy. By order of the Galactic Council, the human species has been declared in violation of galactic law. They have refused lawful tribute demands and shown contempt for proper authority. A punishment fleet will be dispatched to human space to enforce compliance. Any species that aids the humans will face the same fate. But something unexpected happened after the announcement. Instead of the usual silence that followed council pronouncements, there was noise. On a dozen worlds, beings who had been silent for generations began to speak. Some whispered words of support for the humans. Others asked dangerous questions about why the council had the right to demand tribute at all. On Karis 7, Zithkar stood up in the mining tunnel. His supervisor, a cruel Zephyrian overseer, shouted at him to get back to work. For the first time in his life, Zithkar looked his oppressor in the eye and said, "No." The overseer stared in shock. In 300 years of mining operations, no slave had ever refused an order. Around them, other workers stopped digging and watched. "What did you say?" the overseer demanded. Zithkar's voice grew stronger. "I said no. I will not dig anymore today." One by one, the other workers put down their tools. The word spread from tunnel to tunnel. No. It echoed through the mines like a song of rebellion. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. The humans' simple refusal had done something the council never expected. It had reminded the oppressed that they had a choice. Back on the council station, Veltar received reports of unrest from dozens of worlds. His advisors urged immediate military action to crush any signs of rebellion. "Send the fleet to human space," he ordered finally, "but also prepare suppression forces for our other territories. It seems the humans have given our subjects dangerous ideas." As War Marshal Kethmore prepared his fleet, he wondered if the old Corvan ambassador had been right. Maybe the humans were more dangerous than anyone realized, not because of their weapons or their ships, but because of something much worse. They had shown the galaxy that it was possible to say no. And once that idea took root, Kethmore feared it would be very hard to kill. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Earth's primary orbital defense station, watching the tactical displays with careful eyes. Around her, dozens of officers worked at their stations preparing for what everyone knew was coming. The Council's response to humanity's refusal would be swift and brutal. "Admiral, we have the latest intelligence reports from our deep space sensors," reported Commander Williams, handing her a datapad. Sarah looked at the numbers and felt her heart sink. The Council's punishment fleet was massive beyond anything humanity had ever faced. Over 3,000 ships, some larger than anything in Earth's navy. Their smallest cruisers carried more firepower than humanity's biggest battleships. "Any word from the diplomatic channels?" she asked. "Ambassador Vasquez reports that all communication attempts have been ignored. The Council considers us to be an open rebellion." Sarah nodded grimly. She had known Elena Vasquez for 20 years. Ever since they had served together in the early days of human space exploration, Elena was brave, smart, and completely stubborn when she believed in something. Her single-word reply to the Council's demands had surprised no one who knew her well. Dr. Marcus Webb entered the command center, carrying a thick folder of research. As humanity's chief xenoanthropologist, he had spent the last 5 years studying every scrap of information about galactic civilization that humans could gather. "Admiral, I have the cultural analysis you requested," he said, setting the folder on her desk. "Give me the short version, Doctor. How do these aliens think?" Marcus adjusted his glasses nervously. "That's the problem, Admiral. They don't think like us at all. For 10,000 years, galactic civilization has operated on a very simple principle. Might makes right. The strongest species rules and everyone else submit, and that's worked for them? Perfectly. The Council maintains order through overwhelming technological superiority. When they make demands, Species calculate their chances of winning a war and almost always choose to comply. It's logical, efficient, and it keeps the peace. Sarah frowned. So why didn't we follow the same logic? Because we're not logical in the same way they are. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, Admiral. When our ancestors faced a mammoth or a saber-toothed tiger, they didn't calculate odds of victory. They found a way to win or died trying. You're saying we're too stubborn to surrender? Marcus smiled. I'm saying we're the first species the Council has encountered that sees impossible odds as a challenge, rather than a reason to quit. In another part of the station, Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat in her office, composing what might be humanity's final message to the galaxy. She had been the one to deliver the famous no to the Council, and she knew that history would remember that moment forever. The communication from Earth's government had been clear. No retreat, no surrender, no tribute. Humanity would stand firm regardless of the consequences. Elena had delivered that message in the simplest way possible, and now the entire galaxy was watching to see what would happen next. A soft chime announced an incoming transmission. Elena opened the channel and found herself looking at the worried face of her daughter, calling from the Mars colony. Mom, are you sure about this? The news feeds are saying the Council has never lost a war. Elena smiled sadly. I'm sure, sweetheart. Some things are worth fighting for even when you can't win. But why? Why couldn't we just pay what they wanted? It's only money and resources. Because it's never just about money and resources, Anna. It's about whether we have the right to choose our own destiny. If we give in now, we'll be giving in forever. Her daughter's voice was quiet. Will I ever see you again? Elena looked out her window at the stars, where the Council's fleet was already traveling toward Earth at faster than light speed. I don't know, but I know that whatever happens, you'll be free to make your own choices. That's worth any price. Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, General Harrison Rodriguez reviewed the planet's defensive preparations. Earth's military had been designed to fight other humans, not advanced alien civilizations. Their weapons seemed primitive compared to what the Council could bring to bear. General, the orbital platforms are reporting full readiness, his aide informed him. What about the civilian evacuations? 70% complete. The remaining population has refused to leave. Rodriguez nodded. He understood why people wanted to stay. This was their home, their world. If they were going to die, they wanted to die fighting for something that mattered. The general walked to his window and looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, the most powerful military force in galactic history was coming to crush humanity for the crime of saying no. By all logic, it should be a short war, but Rodriguez had studied human history. He knew about the Spartans at Thermopylae, the defenders of the Alamo, the Warsaw Uprising. Sometimes the side that should lose fought so hard that they changed everything, even in defeat. In the research labs beneath Geneva, Dr. Sarah Okafor worked frantically on humanity's secret weapons program. For months, her team had been reverse engineering captured alien technology, trying to find ways to level the playing field. Doctor, we have a breakthrough with the shield harmonics, her assistant called out. Sarah rushed to the workstation. On the screen, she could see the mathematical patterns that controlled alien defensive shields. Human scientists had discovered something the aliens apparently didn't know. Their own shields had a fatal weakness that could be exploited. If we can tune our weapons to this frequency, we might be able to penetrate their defenses, her assistant explained. Sarah felt a surge of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. Humanity's greatest advantage had always been their ability to adapt and innovate. While the Council relied on ancient, proven technologies, humans were willing to try new ideas. How long to retrofit our weapons? 48 hours if we work around the clock. Then we work around the clock. Get every available technician on this project. Across the solar system, humanity prepared for war in its own unique way. Unlike other species that would have spent their time negotiating or preparing surrender terms, humans threw themselves into the impossible task of finding a way to win. On the lunar shipyards, workers labored to complete the last of Earth's new destroyers. The ships were smaller and less advanced than anything the Council fielded, but they had been designed with one purpose in mind: to hit hard and fast, then escape before the enemy could respond. Captain Jiang Wei inspected his new command, the destroyer Defiant. The ship was a patchwork of human engineering and salvaged alien technology, held together more by determination than sophisticated design. She's not much to look at, his first officer commented. She doesn't need to be pretty, Zhang replied. She just needs to fight. In the asteroid belt, mining ships were being converted into makeshift warships. The workers knew their crude vessels would last minutes against Council forces, but they volunteered anyway. Every ship that could carry a weapon was being pressed into service. As news of the approaching fleet spread through human space, something remarkable happened. Instead of panic or despair, there was determination. Families said goodbye to their loved ones with tears in their eyes but pride in their hearts. Children too young to fight helped load ammunition. Elderly veterans who had fought in humanity's last wars came out of retirement to serve however they could. The spirit was captured perfectly in a message that spread through human communication networks. It was simple, direct, and very human. They want us to kneel. We choose to stand. Elena Vasquez read that message in her office and smiled. This was why she had said no to the Council. Not because she thought humanity could win a war against impossible odds, but because she believed some things were worth fighting for regardless of the outcome. The Council would learn what humans meant when they refused to surrender. They would discover that some species would rather die free than live as slaves. And perhaps, Elena thought, that lesson would be worth the price they were all about to pay. The Council's punishment fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, like a storm of metal and energy. War Marshal Kethmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. Magnificent, he chittered, his mandibles clicking with pleasure. 3,047 vessels representing the finest military technology in the galaxy. The humans cannot possibly stand against such force. His aide, a young Zephyrian officer, gestured to the sensor readings. Sir, we are detecting human ships moving to intercept. They appear to be advancing toward us. Kethmore's compound eyes focused on the display in surprise. According to sensors, the entire human fleet was moving to meet them in open space. This was not the behavior he expected from a vastly outgunned enemy. How many ships? He asked. Approximately 200 vessels, sir. Most appear to be destroyers and frigates. They are maintaining tight formation and accelerating at maximum burn. The War Marshal studied the tactical situation with growing confusion. In 10,000 years of Council military operations, no enemy had ever charged directly at a superior force like this. The logical response would be to retreat to fortified positions, negotiate for better terms, or simply surrender. Analysis of human fleet composition? Their largest ships are barely 1/10 the mass of our heavy cruisers, sir. Their weapons appear to be primitive kinetic projectiles and fusion warheads. Our shields should stop their attacks easily, Kethmore nodded. This would be a short battle. The humans would learn the same lesson every other rebellious species had learned. The Council's power was absolute. But as the fleets closed distance, something unexpected happened. The human ships began to spread out in a pattern the Council computers couldn't recognize. Instead of maintaining the tight formations favored by most galactic militaries, the humans scattered into loose groups that moved independently. Admiral Sarah Chen watched the alien fleet from the bridge of her flagship. Indomitable. The Council ships were beautiful in their way. Sleek vessels of impossible size that seemed to bend space around them. But beauty wouldn't save them from what was coming. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Remember your training. Hit hard, hit fast, and don't give them time to think. For Earth, came the response from 200 human captains. The first exchange of fire lit up space like a miniature star going nova. The Council's opening salvo was devastating. Beams of coherent energy that could slice through mountains. Several human ships vanished instantly, consumed by forces beyond imagination. But the human response caught the aliens completely off guard. Instead of trying to match the Council's firepower, the human ships used speed and unpredictability. They came in at steep angles, fired everything they had, then broke away before return fire could find them. Captain Zhang Wei dove his destroyer Defiant through the gap between two alien cruisers, his hull glowing red from near misses. His weapons officer had tuned their missiles to the frequency Dr. Okafor's team had discovered, and the results were spectacular. Direct hit on the lead cruiser, his tactical officer shouted. Their shields are fluctuating. Zhang smiled grimly. The aliens had relied on the same shield technology for so long that they had forgotten its weaknesses. Human scientists approaching the problem with fresh eyes had found flaws that had been invisible for centuries. All ships target the shield generators. Use frequency 77 Alpha. Across the battlefield, human ships began to focus their fire on the previously impenetrable defenses of the Council fleet. Shields that had never failed began to flicker and collapse under precisely tuned attacks. Kethmore watched his tactical display with growing alarm. Somehow, impossibly, the humans were penetrating shields that had protected Council vessels for millennia. The battle that should have been a simple extermination was turning into something else entirely. How are they doing this? He demanded. Unknown, sir. Their weapons appear to be operating on a frequency that disrupts our shield harmonics. Impossible. Our shields are perfect. They have been tested against every known weapon. Perhaps, sir, but they were not tested against unknown weapons. The human attack was unlike anything in galactic military history. Where other species fought with rigid formations and predictable tactics, the humans seemed to make up their strategy as they went along. Individual ships broke formation to pursue targets of opportunity. Damaged vessels used ramming attacks rather than retreat. Commander Lisa Park brought her frigate Resilient in close to a Council battleship, too close for the larger vessel's main guns to target her. Her ship was dying, atmosphere bleeding from a dozen holes, but she had one last card to play. All hands prepare for ramming speed. Engineering. Overload the reactor on my mark. Her crew didn't question the order. They had all known this might be a one-way mission when they signed up. The frigate accelerated toward the alien ship's engines, its reactor building to critical mass. The explosion, when Resilient struck, was visible across half the solar system. The Council battleship, its engines destroyed, began to drift helplessly. One human frigate had eliminated a vessel 50 times its size. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. Humans used tactics that defied logic: suicide runs, coordinated swarm attacks, and weapons improvised from mining equipment. They fought with a desperation that shocked the alien observers. Sir, we are receiving communications from multiple Council vessels, Kethmore's communications officer reported. Several captains are requesting permission to withdraw. The War Marshal's mandibles clicked in anger. Withdraw? From a battle against primitive humans? Sir, we have lost 47 vessels and the humans continue to fight. Our tactical computers cannot predict their movement patterns. Kethmore looked at the displays showing the ongoing battle. Human ships swarmed around his massive vessels like angry wasps, too small and fast to hit reliably but dangerous in groups. Every time his forces adapted to their tactics, the humans changed strategy. They fight without honor, he muttered. They use weapons against shields, ramming attacks, coordinated strikes. Where is the glory in such combat? His aide looked confused. Sir, I do not understand. Are they not fighting to win? Of course they are fighting to win, but they are fighting to win at any cost. They show no regard for proper military protocol, no respect for the rules of engagement. They fight like what, sir? Kethmore's voice was quiet. Like they have nothing left to lose. Across the galaxy, other species watched the battle through intercepted communications and long-range sensors. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Council's fleet was taking significant losses. The humans were losing ships at a terrible rate, but they were making the Council pay for every victory. On Kara 7, the Talon workers who had said no to their overseers gathered around hidden communication devices, listening to the reports with growing amazement. They are actually fighting, whispered Zithkar. The humans are fighting the Council and hurting them. Around him, other workers nodded in wonder. It was impossible, but it was happening. The tiny human fleet was proving that the Council could be hurt, that their technology was not perfect, that their power was not absolute. The battle raged for 6 hours before Kethmore finally called for withdrawal. His fleet had lost over 200 vessels, while the humans had lost more than half their ships. By any military standard, the Council had won. But as his battered fleet regrouped at the edge of the system, Kethmore felt no sense of victory. The humans had accomplished something unprecedented. They had bloodied the Council's nose and lived to tell about it. Sir, we are receiving reports from across the galaxy, his communications officer said nervously. There are uprisings on 17 worlds. The oppressed species are using human tactics, ramming attacks, improvised weapons, coordinated strikes. Kethmore closed his eyes. The humans had done more than fight a battle. They had shown the galaxy that the Council could be hurt. They had proven that determination and courage could overcome superior technology. The War Marshal opened a channel to the Council leadership. Supreme Chancellor, we have a problem. The humans have given the galaxy a very dangerous idea. What idea? Veltar's voice came back. They have shown everyone that it is possible to fight back and survive. The images spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Grainy recordings from damaged sensors showed human pilots ramming their fighters into Council dreadnoughts. Communication intercepts captured the final words of dying captains. For Earth. For freedom! The footage was raw, desperate, and completely inspiring to beings who had never seen anyone fight back against the Council. On 1,000 worlds, in hidden meeting places and secret gatherings, oppressed species watched the impossible battle over and over. They saw tiny human ships dancing between massive alien vessels, dodging weapons that could crack planets. They witnessed the moment when humanity chose death over surrender. Zithkar crouched in the deep tunnels of Kara 7, surrounded by fellow Talon workers. The mining planet had been a slave world for 300 years, its people broken and submissive. But now something was changing. The humans had shown them that defiance was possible. Look at this, whispered Grak, holding up a small communication device. On the screen, a human destroyer was ramming a Council cruiser, both ships disappearing in a ball of fire. They knew they would die, but they did it anyway. Around them, dozens of Talon workers watched in silence. Their forearms trembled with emotions they had forgotten how to feel. When was the last time any of them had chosen to do something, instead of simply obeying orders? The humans fought for 6 hours, another worker said. 6 hours against the greatest fleet in the galaxy. They lost, but they made the Council bleed. An old Talon named Crick spoke from the shadows. He was ancient, one of the few who remembered life before the Council's occupation. I have not seen fighting like this since the Great Rebellion, when our ancestors first tried to resist the invaders. What happened to the Great Rebellion? Asked a young worker. We were crushed. Our ships were destroyed, our cities burned, but for a brief time we were free. Zithkar stood up slowly. Around him the other workers watched as he picked up his mining laser. The tool had been used for digging ore for decades, but it could serve another purpose. I will not mine today, he said quietly. I will not follow orders. I will not bow my head and pretend to be grateful for scraps. What will you do? Grak asked. I will fight. The words spread through the tunnels like fire through dry grass. Fight. Such a simple concept, but one that had been forbidden for so long that most workers had forgotten it was possible. Within hours, the first uprising in 3 centuries began on Kara 7. Talon workers armed with mining equipment faced off against Zephyrian overseers with plasma rifles. By all logic, it should have been a massacre, but the workers had learned from watching the humans. They didn't fight fair or honorably. They used the tunnels they knew better than anyone. They improvised weapons from industrial equipment. They coordinated attacks using the communication systems built for mining operations. Most importantly, they fought with the desperate courage of beings who had nothing left to lose. The same pattern repeated itself across the galaxy. On the agricultural world of Verdania, plant workers rose up against their bio-collective masters. On the factory planet Nexus Prime, machine-bonded slaves sabotaged production lines. On the crystal moon, resonance-enslaved singers broke their harmonic chains and sang songs of rebellion. Each uprising was small, local, and logically doomed to failure. But together they created a crisis the Council had never faced before. For 10,000 years, the galaxy had been stable because everyone accepted their place in the hierarchy. Now, suddenly, no one wanted to stay in their assigned role. Supreme Chancellor Veltar stood in the Council's Emergency Command Center, watching reports flow in from across their territory. Red warning lights flashed on star maps as uprisings sparked on world after world. How many systems are affected? He asked his aide. 47 and growing, sir. The pattern is always the same. Local populations watch the human battle footage, then begin organized resistance using improvised tactics. Veltar studied the tactical displays with growing dread. Each individual rebellion was manageable, but there were too many of them. The Council's forces were stretched thin, trying to respond to simultaneous uprisings across their empire. What is the analysis from our military strategists? They say the humans have created a new form of warfare, sir. Instead of trying to defeat superior technology with better technology, they use unpredictable tactics, acceptable losses, and psychological warfare. Psychological warfare? Yes, sir. By fighting even when they knew they would lose, the humans have convinced other species that resistance is possible. They have weaponized hope. The Chancellor closed his eyes. Hope, the most dangerous force in the galaxy, because it made beings do irrational things. For millennia, the Council had maintained order by ensuring that hope never took root. They had crushed every rebellion so thoroughly that few species even remembered trying to resist. But the humans had changed everything. They had shown the galaxy that David could hurt Goliath, even if he couldn't kill him. On the distant world of Aquaria, the amphibious depth dwellers had lived in underwater cities for thousands of years, providing rare minerals to the Council in exchange for basic survival. Their rebellion began when a young engineer named Splash of Waves refused to repair a mining platform. "Why will you not work?" demanded the Zephyrian supervisor, his translation device bubbling underwater. Splash of Waves floated in the water, watching recordings of human ships on a waterproof screen. Because the humans said no. If they can say no to the entire Council, I can say no to you. The supervisor activated his pain inducer, a device that sent electric shocks through the water. But instead of crying out and returning to work, Splash of Waves began to sing. It was an old song, one that told the story of the deep trenches where his people had once been free. Other depth dwellers heard the song and joined in. The harmony grew stronger as more voices added to it, until the entire underwater city rang with music that had been forbidden for centuries. The supervisor tried to stop them, but how do you silence an entire ocean? Similar scenes played out everywhere the human recordings reached. The insectoid swarm folk on Hive Prime began to break away from their collective consciousness, individual drones choosing their own paths for the first time in their species' history. The silicon-based crystalline on Resonance Prime cracked their harmonic locks and sang discordant songs of freedom. Each rebellion was unique, shaped by the culture and biology of the species involved. But they all shared one common element. They had learned from watching humans that it was possible to fight back, even against impossible odds. War Marshal Kethmore found himself commanding not one battle, but 100 small wars scattered across the galaxy. His forces were designed to fight large-scale conflicts against organized enemies, not guerrilla campaigns waged by desperate freedom fighters. "Sir, we have another problem," his aide reported. "Our own troops are beginning to question orders. Several ship crews have requested transfers away from suppression duties." "Explain." "Many of our soldiers come from species that were conquered by the Council generations ago. Watching the humans fight has reminded them of their own people's history of resistance." Kethmore felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. The human rebellion was spreading even into the Council's own military. How do you fight an enemy whose greatest weapon is the idea that fighting is possible? What do our analysts recommend? Complete destruction of the human homeworld, sir. They believe that if Earth is destroyed, the rebellion will lose its symbol and collapse. The War Marshal nodded grimly. It made sense. The humans had started this galactic uprising by showing that resistance was possible. If humanity was erased completely, the message would be clear. Defiance leads to extinction. But even as he prepared to give the order for Earth's destruction, Kethmore wondered if it was already too late. The idea of freedom, once planted, was very hard to kill. Across the galaxy, on worlds where beings had been slaves for generations, a new word was being spoken in 100 different languages. It was a simple word, just 2 letters in most tongues, but it carried the power to reshape civilizations. The word was no. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the Council was learning what it meant to hear that word from a galaxy that was no longer willing to obey. The final fleet that assembled at the edge of human space was the largest military force ever gathered in galactic history. 10,000 ships of the line, led by the Council's ultimate weapon, the reality-warping dreadnought, Inevitable. War Marshal Kethmore stood on its bridge, knowing that this battle would end the human problem once and for all. "Status report," he commanded. "All fleets report ready, sir. We have enough firepower to crack Earth's crust and boil its oceans. The humans cannot possibly survive this assault." Kethmore nodded. The Council had decided that half measures were no longer sufficient. The human homeworld would be completely destroyed, serving as an example to every other species in the galaxy. The message would be clear. This is what happens to those who say no to the Council. Sir, we are detecting hyperspace signatures, the sensor officer reported. Multiple ships dropping out of FTL near Earth. Reinforcements from the outer colonies? Negative, sir. These ships? They don't match human design patterns. On the main display, Kethmore watched as dozens of crude spacecraft appeared around Earth. They were clearly makeshift vessels, converted mining ships, agricultural haulers fitted with weapons, even what appeared to be passenger liners with missile pods welded to their hulls. Identification? Sir, we are receiving transponder signals from... This cannot be correct. Tullan mining vessels, Verdanian transport ships, Aquarian deep-sea craft, and others. Dozens of species, sir. They appear to be here to defend Earth. Kethmore stared at the display in disbelief. In 10,000 years of galactic history, subject species had never worked together. They had never even communicated with each other, let alone coordinated military action. Yet here they were, a ragtag fleet of former slaves come to stand with humanity. Admiral Sarah Chen watched the impossible sight from Earth's orbital command center. Her fleet was down to fewer than 100 ships after the previous battle, and she had expected to face the Council's final assault alone. But now, filling the space around Earth, was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Admiral, we are receiving communications from the newcomers, her communications officer reported. Put them through. The main screen split into dozens of windows, showing faces from across the galaxy. A four-armed Talon miner, an aquatic depth dweller in a water-filled helmet, a crystalline being whose body rang with musical tones. Species that had been enemies for millennia, united for the first time in their shared desire for freedom. Zithkar's scarred face appeared in the center window. The Talon worker had led the rebellion on Karis 7 and somehow stolen a mining ship to get here. Admiral Chen, he said in broken standard, we come to fight. We learn from humans. We say no too. Other voices joined in, a chorus of species declaring their intention to stand with Earth. The Verdanians will not let you fight alone. The Aquarian Deep Fleet swims beside you. The crystalline singers harmonize with human courage. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. Why? Why risk everything for a species you barely know? Zithkar's voice was simple and direct. Because you show us how to say no. Now we all say no together. The final battle for Earth began with the largest space engagement in galactic history. The Council's perfect formations faced off against a fleet that had no business existing. Former slaves fighting beside the species that had inspired them to rebel. The makeshift alliance should have been crushed in minutes. Their ships were converted civilian vessels. Their crews were miners, farmers, and factory workers with no military training. Their coordination was non-existent, but they had learned from watching humans fight. They didn't try to match the Council's technology or formations. Instead, they used tactics born of desperation and innovation. Captain Zhang Wei, now commanding one of the last human destroyers, found himself fighting alongside a Talon mining ship that had been converted into a ramming vessel. The alien captain spoke no standard, but they communicated through actions, coordinating their attacks with hand signals and ship movements. Human ship, we go together, the Talon captain managed in broken English. For freedom, yes? For freedom, Zhang confirmed. The two ships dove toward a Council battlecruiser, the mining vessel's industrial cutting lasers carving through armor, while Zhang's destroyer targeted the shield generators. It was clumsy, dangerous, and completely effective. Across the battlefield, similar partnerships formed spontaneously. Aquarian submarines that had been designed for deep ocean mining used their pressure hulls to ram Council ships. Verdanian agricultural vessels sprayed their cargo holds full of explosive fertilizer like massive shotgun blasts. Crystalline singers used their harmonic abilities to disrupt Council communications. War Marshal Kethmore watched the battle with growing horror. His fleet was winning, but at a terrible cost. The enemy ships fought with such desperate courage that they were taking dozens of Council vessels with them as they died. Sir, the inevitable is ready to fire, his weapons officer reported. Kethmore looked at the massive weapon that could literally tear holes in spacetime. One shot would destroy Earth and end this rebellion forever. Fire when ready. But before the inevitable could discharge its reality-warping weapon, something unexpected happened. A small ship, little more than a modified escape pod, came screaming out of nowhere and slammed into the dreadnought's main weapon array. The pilot was Ambassador Elena Vasquez, the woman who had started everything with her simple no. She had stolen a shuttle and packed it with every explosive she could find. "This is for everyone who was told they had no choice," she said over the open channel. Just before impact, the explosion didn't destroy the inevitable, but it damaged the reality weapon beyond repair. The Council's ultimate advantage was gone, and the battle became a brutal slugging match between ships and crews. As the fight raged, something remarkable happened. The crewed Alliance fleet began to work together in ways that defied all military logic. Species that had been enemies for millennia started protecting each other's ships. Tolan miners shared targeting data with Aquarian submarines. Crystalline singers translated communications between species that couldn't understand each other. Dr. Marcus Webb, watching from Earth's surface, realized what was happening. "They're not just fighting together," he said in wonder. "They're becoming something new, a galactic community based on choice rather than conquest." The battle lasted 14 hours and ended not with a decisive victory, but with exhaustion on both sides. The Council fleet had lost nearly half its ships. The Alliance fleet was down to a few dozen vessels. But something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. Kethmore received the order to withdraw with a mixture of relief and confusion. His forces could probably still destroy Earth, but at what cost? And what would be the point? The idea of resistance had already spread beyond stopping. "Sir, we are receiving reports from across the galaxy," his aide reported. "The uprisings have spread to over 300 worlds. Our forces are requesting immediate reinforcement everywhere." The war marshal realized the terrible truth. The humans had won, not by defeating the Council's fleet, but by showing the galaxy that victory was possible. Every species that had stood with Earth would return home with that knowledge. The rebellion would spread until it consumed everything. As the Council fleet retreated, the survivors of the Alliance gathered around Earth. They were battered, exhausted, and facing an uncertain future. But for the first time in galactic history, they were free. Admiral Chen opened a channel to all ships. "This is Admiral Chen to all vessels. I want to thank every species, every captain, every crew member who stood with us today. You didn't have to come. You chose to come. And that choice has changed everything." Zithkar's voice came back over the communication system. "Admiral, what happens now?" Sarah looked out at the stars, where the lights of 1,000 worlds twinkled in the darkness. On many of those worlds, beings were standing up and saying no to their oppressors for the first time in their lives. "Now we go home," she said. "And we teach others what we learned here. That freedom is a choice. And sometimes the most important word in any language is no." Across the galaxy, young beings of 100 different species would grow up hearing the story of the day when their parents learned to say no. They would learn about the humans who chose death over slavery, and the alliance that formed when different species discovered they could work together. The Council still existed, still controlled many worlds, but their absolute authority was broken forever. And in the hidden places where rebels gathered, they would tell the story of humanity's one-word reply that had stunned the galaxy and changed everything. The word was no, and it had set the galaxy free.